when it comes to marriage and divorce, the Bible gives one of its hardest teachings. It's a subject that touches nearly every family, sparks heated debates, and often leaves people with more questions than answers. Many wonder, what does God really say about divorce? Is it ever allowed? And why does the Bible set such a high standard for marriage? Today, we're going to take a careful, compassionate look at this teaching. We'll go from Genesis to the words of Jesus, to Paul's letters, and finally to what it means for us today. By the end of this video, you may see marriage, divorce, and God's heart for relationships in a way you never have before. Let's begin where the Bible begins, with God's design. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 22 through 24, we read that God created the woman from a man. And then it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." This is profound. Marriage is not just about companionship. It is about unity, about covenant. The phrase one flesh doesn't mean just physical union, but total oneness of life, purpose, and soul. Marriage, in God's design, was never meant to be temporary. It was a picture of his faithfulness. But from the very beginning, sin damaged relationships. Adam and Eve turned against God and quickly against one another. Instead of harmony, there was blame, tension, and brokenness. And this is echoed through history. Betrayal, conflict, even violence entering marriages. By the time of Moses, divorce was widespread in Israel. To limit chaos, Moses permitted men to give their wives certificate of divorce. That may sound harsh, but it was actually a step of mercy because it gave women legal standing in society. Still, this was not God's original plan. Centuries later, when Jesus was teaching, the Pharisees tried to trap him with a question. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? This was controversial even in their day. Some rabbis taught you could only divorce for serious reasons, like adultery. Others taught you could divorce for almost anything. Burning dinner, speaking too loudly, even just falling out of favor. So when they asked Jesus, they expected him to take a side. But his answer shocked everyone. He went back to Genesis, back to God's design, saying, "So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." The Pharisees pushed back. "Why then did Moses permit divorce?" And Jesus replied, "Because of the hardness of your hearts. But it was not this way from the beginning." This is key. Divorce was never God's ideal. It was a concession because of sin. Jesus then raises the bar. "I tell you, anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery." This was radical. He was saying marriage is sacred, binding, and not to be tossed aside. No more easy divorce. God sees the covenant as lifelong. In Mark's gospel, Jesus' words are even stricter. There, he doesn't even include the exception. Why? Because he was speaking into a culture where people treated divorce casually. His words were meant to shock them back to God's seriousness about marriage. The disciples, hearing this, responded, "If this is a situation, it is better not to marry." Even they were stunned. And that shows just how high Jesus' teaching was. But the Bible doesn't stop there. The Apostle Paul also wrestled with this issue in his letters. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, he affirms Jesus' teaching that a husband and wife should not separate. But he also addresses situations Jesus hadn't spoken directly about, like when a believer is married to an unbeliever. Paul says that the unbelieving spouse chooses to stay, the believer should not divorce them. But if the unbeliever leaves, the believer is not bound in such cases. This shows God's compassion. He doesn't trap people in impossible circumstances. So let's put this together. God's original design is that marriage is lifelong. Divorce is not part of that design. It is allowed only because of sin. Jesus sets the standard. Marriage is sacred, and divorce is only permitted in cases of sexual immorality. Paul adds that abandonment by an unbelieving spouse is also an allowance. Anything beyond that falls outside God's perfect will. But here's something crucial. While God hates divorce, he does not hate divorced people. In Malachi 2, God says he hates divorce because it brings violence and brokenness into families. But that does not mean he rejects those who have been through it. The Bible is full of stories of broken people whom God restored. David, who committed adultery and murder, yet was called a man after God's own heart. Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, yet was restored and became a leader of the church. God's mercy is greater than our failures. So what does this mean for us today? If you are married, remember that marriage is a covenant. It takes forgiveness, patience, and prayer. It's not always easy, but God can give strength to endure. A marriage built on Christ can survive storms. If you are divorced, do not live under shame. There is grace. God knows your story, your pain, and your struggles. Divorce may mark a chapter of your life, but it does not define your identity in Christ. In Him, there is restoration. If you are single, take marriage seriously before entering it. Don't rush in lightly. Pray, seek God's wisdom, and count the cost. Marriage is meant to reflect God's love, and that requires commitment. So yes, marriage and divorce may be one of the Bible's hardest teachings, but it also reveals one of God's greatest truths. His covenant love never fails. Human love may falter. Promises may be broken, but God's love is unbreakable. He remains faithful even when we are not. If this message opened your eyes, don't stop here. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We're diving into other tough questions about faith in our upcoming videos. Share this with someone who needs hope in their marriage or healing from their past. And let me ask you, what do you think is the hardest part of Jesus' teaching on marriage and divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Remember this, marriage may be hard, divorce may be painful, but God's love is greater than both. And in Him, there is always hope.